Hollywood's golden age. It makes you think of pure glamour, of stars who seemed larger than life, their faces projected on the silver screen, their lives a perfect fantasy. We've all seen the pictures, the dazzling premieres, the flawless smiles. But behind the velvet curtain was another Hollywood, a place of deep shadows, whispered secrets, and ruthless ambition. It was a world where a handshake could make a career and a quiet phone call could end one. For every star that rose, another flickered out, often for reasons the public never knew, and few stars commanded that kingdom, like Burt Lancaster. He was the definition of an American movie star. A former circus acrobat, he had a raw, electric energy, a mix of rugged toughness and surprising heart that audiences loved for decades. He wasn't just another handsome face. He was a powerhouse, an Oscar winner, a respected producer, and a man of principle. On screen, he was the hero. Off screen, he was a fierce liberal, a supporter of civil rights, and a man so dedicated to his causes he ended up on President Nixon's enemies list. By all accounts, he was a man who stood for integrity in an industry that often had none. But what if the greatest role he ever played was Burt Lancaster himself? What if the principled star was just a carefully built facade? And what if, hidden away for decades, was the proof? There's a story, a persistent and chilling piece of Hollywood lore, about what happened after Lancaster passed away in 1994. His family, sorting through his life, expected to find scripts and awards. The legend, however, claims they found something else entirely in the back of a forgotten closet. Not a box of mementos, but a heavy, cold metal suitcase. It was locked. And when they finally forced it open, the story goes that what they found inside didn't just threaten to unravel the legacy of Burt Lancaster. It threatened to expose the terrifying truth of what it took to remain a king in the land of make-believe. The weeks after Burt Lancaster's death in October 1994 were a blur of grief for his family. True to form, he requested no funeral, a private decision from a man who always guarded his personal life. The world mourned the icon, the star of over 85 films. But for his children, the task was more intimate, to sort through the physical world of a man who had been a giant in their lives. His Century City home was full of memories, but an older, less used house in Beverly Hills held the deeper history. As the family sorted through furniture and photos, the last stop was the basement, a space cluttered with forgotten things, including stacks of paperwork from his groundbreaking independent production company, Hecht Hill Lancaster. And here's where the legend begins. The story goes that in a far corner, one of his sons noticed something odd, a section of wood paneling that was just slightly mismatched. It wasn't a secret room from a movie, but a cleverly hidden closet, its door flush with the wall. Prying it open, they found it mostly empty, except for a single metal suitcase sitting in the center, as if placed there with purpose. There was no key. A sense of unease crept in. This felt different. This felt deliberate. After a moment, they forced the locks. The metallic screech echoed in the basement, and as the lid popped open, they saw it wasn't filled with valuables or love letters. The suitcase, according to this rumor, was filled with paper, a meticulously organized collection of documents. And on top of the first stack was a handwritten cover page with a chilling two-word title, The Eliminated Ones. What did it mean? As they lifted that page, a cold dread began to set in. They weren't looking at old studio notes. They were looking at a secret history, a catalog of shattered dreams supposedly curated by their own father. The story claims that the man the world saw as a hero had been hiding a secret life as a puppeteer, deciding who would become a star and who would be erased. If the legend is to be believed, that metal suitcase held a nearly 2-inch thick catalog of ghosts, a dossier of about 40 names. These weren't Lancaster's famous rivals. They were mostly young, unknown actors and actresses from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the very decades when Lancaster's power as an actor and producer was at its absolute peak. The dossier was said to be a work of obsessive detail. Each person had a file with a professional headshot, the kind full of hope and ambition. The story claims that next to many of these photos, Lancaster had attached candid snapshots, marked with a brutal red X, a mark of cancellation. Below the photos were the documents, copies of contracts that were never signed, casting lists where a name was circled, then furiously crossed out, and unsent letters of encouragement. The most chilling part of the alleged collection was Lancaster's own handwritten notes. Next to the name of a handsome young actor, a note supposedly read, "Too prominent. His look challenges the lead. Can't have two lions in one cage." Beside the photo of a charismatic actress, "Image doesn't fit the brand. Too much fire, not enough deference. She will be trouble." Another file simply said, "Could cause trouble. Knows too much." The notes, if they exist, paint a picture of a mind obsessed with control, a self-appointed gatekeeper deciding who was worthy of the spotlight. One file in this mythical dossier was supposedly thicker than the rest. It was for a young stage actor from New York named Leo, whose talent was compared to a young Brando. Hecht Hill Lancaster was apparently on the verge of signing him to a multi-picture deal. But then Lancaster's own notes allegedly began to appear, growing more agitated. The first was professional. "He's good, maybe too good. Needs to learn his place." A few weeks later, a more paranoid entry. "Saw him talking to Walter Winchell's, man at Musso and Frank." In that era, even a whisper to the powerful and vindictive gossip columnist Walter Winchell could be a death sentence. The final note on Leo's file was short and brutal. "Terminate the offer. Make sure he doesn't work at another major, a risk we can't afford." This was the alleged pattern repeated through 40 files. A spark of talent identified, a threat assessed, and a career quietly extinguished. But perhaps the most disturbing part of the legend is an undercurrent of guilt. Tucked in the back of the suitcase, the story goes, was a longer, undated passage where Lancaster wrote, "I know I stole their dreams. This town is a jungle, and you either kill or get eaten. I chose to kill. May God forgive me for it, because I never will." This single passage, if real, would transform the dossier from a record of sabotage into a tragic confession, the burden of a man trapped by the very power he had built. So why would a star at the top of the world engage in something so dark? The story's believers point to the very real pressures and fears that haunted Burt Lancaster's life. The key to understanding the legend of the eliminated ones lies in one thing: fear of exposure. From the late 1940s on, Lancaster was a man being watched. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI kept a running file on him for decades. Their interest was twofold. First, his politics. Lancaster was a vocal liberal who supported the ACLU and criticized the House Un-American Activities Committee's witch hunts. In the paranoid Cold War climate, his activism was a huge red flag for the feds. Second, and perhaps more dangerously, the FBI was interested in his private life. Rumors about Lancaster's sexuality had swirled for years. While he was known as a womanizer, he was also dogged by whispers of relationships with men. In the 1950s, that was a career-ending secret. The FBI actively investigated him for alleged homosexual behavior, and Hoover, a man obsessed with the private lives of powerful men, reportedly saw Lancaster as a potential security threat because of it. For Lancaster, every party and every shire friendship carried the risk of total ruin. This constant surveillance likely bred deep paranoia. He knew he was being watched. This is where his production company, Hecht Hill Lancaster, was so important. It wasn't just a business, it was a fortress. By becoming one of the first actors to create his own independent production house, he seized control. He didn't have to answer to studio bosses anymore. He could control the casting, the environment, everything, but a fortress has to be defended, and the biggest threat could come from within. A young, ambitious actor who talked too much, who might be an informant for a columnist or the FBI, wasn't just an annoyance, he was an existential threat. The dossier's cryptic notes: "Could cause trouble, knows too much, suddenly make terrifying sense in this context. They read like risk assessments from a man who believed, maybe rightly, that he was surrounded by enemies. He was a king protecting his castle, willing to sacrifice anyone who might jeopardize its walls out of a desperate fear of being torn down. This dark narrative is fueled by another rumor, that Lancaster worked on a secret, unpublished memoir in his final years, one filled with explosive revelations about Hollywood's dark side. Like the dossier, this memoir has never surfaced. But its rumored existence paints a picture of a man who was both a participant in a brutal system and its secret chronicler, a man caught between the need to control the narrative and the urge to confess. The alleged discovery of the suitcase and its devastating contents would have been a quiet bomb detonating within the Lancaster family. According to the story, they made a decision. The suitcase was closed, its contents sealed away, becoming the family's own guarded secret. But secrets this explosive have a way of seeping out. Over the years, whispers of a black book or a secret list kept by Lancaster began to circulate among Hollywood insiders and historians, often dismissed as just another conspiracy theory. The family has never confirmed the story, and the dossier itself remains a ghost, a tangible piece of evidence that, if it exists, is locked away from public view. So how does this story, even as a rumor, force us to reevaluate Burt Lancaster? It challenges the very foundation of his public image. The man who bravely stood up to the McCarthy-era blacklist now stands accused in this story of running his own secret blacklist. The principled activist who fought for the underdog is painted as someone who may have crushed the careers of those he deemed a threat. His groundbreaking work as a producer on daring films like Marty and Sweet Smell of Success is cast in a new, more sinister light. Sweet Smell of Success becomes especially haunting. In it, Lancaster gives an iconic performance as J.J. Hunsaker, a monstrously powerful columnist who destroys careers on a whim, a character based on Walter Winchell. Did Lancaster recognize a part of himself in that role? Was he playing out a heightened version of the control he was supposedly exercising in his own life? This hidden story doesn't erase his accomplishments. He was still a magnificent actor and a champion of civil rights. But the legend of the dossier suggests an almost unbearable cost to maintaining that platform. It suggests his public virtue may have been funded by private ruthlessness. The man who emerges from this story is infinitely more complex and tragic than the gleaming Hollywood icon. He becomes a figure of Shakespearean proportions, a powerful king haunted by paranoia, a moral crusader who may have committed immoral acts, a man who achieved legendary success but lived in fear of being swallowed whole. The story of the eliminated. One's is a chilling reminder that in Hollywood, the brightest lights can cast the darkest shadows. It raises the question, was Lancaster a monster or a product of a monstrous system? Was he just playing the game of old Hollywood by its true unwritten rules, rules that demanded absolute control and the quiet elimination of any threat? So what are we to make of Burt Lancaster now? Can we admire the artist while acknowledging the ruthless puppeteer depicted in this legend? The tale of the eliminated ones offers no easy answers. It leaves us with a more complicated, more human, and ultimately more troubling portrait of a titan. It proves that behind every perfect Hollywood facade, there's a story far more complex than the one told on screen. A story of secrets, sacrifices, and the silent, brutal cost of fame. What do you think? Does a story like this, even if it's just a rumor, change how you see Burt Lancaster and his legacy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.